major one of storytelling is what I'm thinking here. Welcome.
Hello, everyone.
To episode 6 of Sharing Our Story. And thank you to all you wonderful people who left comments on YouTube. It was really quite overwhelming.
Yeah, it was really cool.
We actually heard from a lot of people this week about our story, which was actually quite overwhelming because a lot of the people are from our story. And I'm not sure why we're hearing from them. Maybe they're just like checking in to let us know that they know that we know that they're listening or something.
So, hey, everyone.
Hey, everyone. Belongs here.
If you're listening to this and you're in our story, what's up?
So part 6, if you skip part 5, I highly recommend part 5. Parts 1 through 4, take or leave. Part 5 is really kind of, we're picking up where we left off in part 5. And if you remember, we are now in October of 2016, almost 1 year into this spiritual discipline process that I entered into, I willingly submitted to, with a group of 2 men leading it in the Cincinnati area. And there was no official thing, no official organization I'm a part of. It's just kind of completely voluntary. But my spiritual code was so ingrained in me of submission that, something being officially a church or a 501c3 did not matter to me as much as what I thought God saw me as and what the Bible said. And that was enough for me to go through this crazy process. So we talked about selling our business and quitting work for a couple weeks and going to counseling, all because we were told to by these 1 or 2 somewhat random characters that we trusted.
Yeah.
So where we ended off, we were going to tell you guys that here we are 10 months later in October. We started in December. So we're almost a full year. And now for the first time, we are finally meeting with David and Stephen at Stephen's house to hear about their research after interviewing 5 or 6 families, I'm not sure how many. And now they have what they consider the verdict. They're going to tell me what they learned about specifically me at this point.
And they never told us that they were going to interview these families, correct?
I don't
remember them telling us.
I don't remember this either.
I remember being like, oh, you went and talked to these people?
Yeah, I didn't know it was happening. I knew that. And I would have been fine with it had I known. But I also agree, I don't think we were told about this, that this was happening. And the reason why I would have been fine with it was I was still assuming, we knew some bridges had been burned and some relationships were falling apart. And I really was as curious as anyone to know why.
And we thought that these people, David and Stephen, were going to help us build those bridges back up.
And discover why they had fallen apart. So, October 16th, I go to Stephen's house.
We do, both of us.
We both do, yes. And most of this process up until this point had been only me, actually. I think this was the first meeting possibly that you went to.
Yeah, probably.
I think you and I kind of considered you two. Well, first of all, we thought it was generally my business because I was the one being accused.
You were the target.
And I think we also considered you kind of too fragile or volatile to sit here and face these accusations because these people it's pretty heavy duty.
Yeah, and back then, the jury's out as far as if I could handle it or not. I really kind of was erring on the side that I couldn't. But here I was sitting in Steven's living room with you.
So we sit down, and right off the bat, we're told this thing. We're told, okay, we've talked to these families. We have this conclusion we're going to give you, and we're willing to help you move forward. But if we're going to move forward with you, you have to do whatever we say in completion. It's not you can't take bits and pieces of it. It's all or nothing.
Sorry. This fucking
It's really hilarious, isn't it?
Oh, wow. Like, I'm reliving it, and I'm like, fuck. What was I fucking thinking?
Dude, I can tell you what we were thinking. Well, first of all, we were at a place. Well, let's just get into it first, okay? And then we'll get into our conclusion. But so then they pull out 2 documents of their findings. Or maybe it's 2 pages of the same document. I think we have this filed, but I have this written down here. So these were their conclusions. And I don't know. Part of this is a little bit ridiculous to me. It actually seemed ridiculous at the time. Because, first of all, they went and interviewed all these families. And these are families that we had had complex relationships with for years. Some of them more than a decade. Second of all, I think 1 out of these 6 families, Colin, my business partner, he had accused me of being a narcissist. But even then, he had never come to me to resolve the relationship. Besides that, none of these families had ever come to us and talked about any of these things with us.
And we said
or complained at all.
And Steven was like, oh, yes, they did.
Yeah, according to him.
And we're like, no, they didn't.
So then we're getting 5 or 6 families kind of like, it's like a verdict that's delivered, but there's a point given but no counterpoint. Or, you know, it's weird because you'd think like in a trial, which is what this was starting to feel more of, there'd be like, okay, well, we talked to these families and they said that you did this. Is that true? And we could be like, yeah, it is true.
We weren't even allowed to defend ourselves, let alone have a defendant. So it wasn't.
But instead it was like, we talked to these 6 families and this is what's true about you.
Right.
And these were the things they concluded. Number 1, I have a need to be great, which I can't reiterate enough. In the Christian world, that is the biggest no. That disqualifies you from anything. Because everything that you do, you're doing for God and you're doing for others, right, according to as the story goes.
And you weren't good. You weren't very good at faking that, so like some other people.
So that was the big one, a big one. And I guess like just to like reiterate the bear trap we were in. When you're being accused of pride and the need to be great, and you're accused of that, and then you defend yourself.
Yeah. No, I'm not.
It only validates the accusation.
Yeah.
There's actually no way to say, I don't know if this is true. And people are like, okay, so you disagree with 8 people now? That shows how delusional you are.
Right.
Okay. Number 2. This one is so weird. I have pastoring outages and massive shepherding abuses.
First of all, I don't really know what pastoring outages is.
No one does. If you know what pastoring outages and massive shepherding abuses are, leave it in the comments below. But these were actual. This is verbatim what I was accused of. Okay, that's number 2. Number 3, I misunderstand what authority is. Okay. Number 4, I give advice but do not receive it. Which that one's like one of the craziest to me, because when we recounted last week what we had gone through and the fact that we had been going through this process now for 10 months, which was completely unintuitive to me. Mm-hmm. That shows like how far off this was.
How delusional
What
they
are we
were.
on, 5?
Maybe. Yeah.
I use the tongue to control instead of bless. Okay, that was it. So maybe was that 6 or 5? I don't know. That's it. You get the picture.
Yep.
Now, I'm trying to figure out if I should get straight to our counselor's interpretation of this. Yeah, I'm going to go for it. So, this list felt weird to me. Actually, scrap it. We're going to come to that in a little bit.
There was no... Well, I probably shouldn't say that because that's jumping the gun.
Let's go for it. It's both on both our minds.
What I know now, because of our therapy, is with this list, there's no specific behaviors attached to these things, which apparently is kind of crazy to just like accuse people. I mean, people do it all the time, but it's not helpful.
What our therapist pointed out, exactly what Cammie said, was, and he was actually talking about biblical sin at the time, which was what we were using as a metric. And he said, most of the biblical commandments about sin involve a behavior. So if Cammie steals something, I can point to a mug. There's a time and a place and an action. I can say, that mug is mine. You took it, and now I don't have it. And she can flat out deny it. But we're not talking ambiguous. We're not saying like, hey, you are mean. That's like a very general statement. A behavior is something, a sin against me is a behavior that's done against me. You hit me. You said I was an asshole. You poked me in the eye. You said you would come to the meeting and you did not. Those are specific behaviors. And this list, as I go through it again, is completely void. And we'll get into the source documents in a little bit because it turns out Stephen, that interviewed all these families, took copious notes about what they said exactly. But I have the need to be great, okay? There's no behavior. I have pastoring outages and massive shepherding abuses. I would love to hear, still to this day, I would actually love to hear what one of these abuses is.
Yeah.
But this was never, to this day, there has not been one example given to us, either, especially by the people, but even by Stephen and David. Misuse and misunderstand what authority is. I give advice but do not receive it. Which, who gives a fuck if that's even true? I use the tongue to control instead of bless. Okay, so those are the accusations. Then, what we were told is that we would need to send out a blanket email to these 5 families, like basically on the spot. And I'm just taking these quotes. One big humbling yourself email to everybody with a promise of more coming. The email would have to contain a desire to hear everybody without defending ourselves. And unless we were willing to write this letter, they were not willing to move forward. So at this point, they said that Jesus was the type of dude that humbled himself and would apologize for anything, whether he did it or not. He would, like, what humility looked like was to take an accusation, whether it's true or not, and own it and apologize for it.
Stephen was using Philippians 2 or 3, I think. And to this day, I can't read those passages without being like, ugh, because of the way he used them with us.
And at this point, Stephen gave examples to us about how he had done this, which we've now heard from numerous sources, so many examples and stories of people he's fucked that he has not apologized for. But at the time, it didn't feel like, it felt too far, but it still felt like maybe this is what we need to do.
But at this time, we had our counselor's voice in our heads, even though it was like a little faint, of like, red flag, I don't know about this. I don't know about this. I mean, I remember my body just like tensing up and just being like, what is going on? I don't really this feels really wrong to me.
And it's amazing now, because if I sat in a meeting, first of all, I wouldn't sit in a meeting like this now. But if I did and these things were said about me, I would say, like, fuck off.
Yeah.
You know? But at the time, it felt so courageous to say, we need to think about this.
Oh, yeah. And we got flack right away for even just saying that.
Yeah. It was like labeled as rebellion.
Yeah.
Or pride again. So we went, it was about 2 weeks later, we went to our appointment with our therapist, Dr. Thompson. And I mean, this is where I want to just like talk about our therapy, because I think we've been going to therapy for about 6 months now, about once a month, because I started off going as jumping through hoops. I wasn't interested in doing it myself. It's not that I'm against therapy, but I didn't have faith in finding a good therapist for that amount of money. It just didn't seem worth it to me. So,
but this was worth it at the time for you to find a therapist.
So by the second meeting, I just remember calling Cammie, driving home, and we actually have this all on video because we were vlogging about it at the time. Even though, ironically, we weren't vlogging about what it was about. We were just vlogging our side and our experience. And I called Cammie, and I was just crying. And I said, Cammie, maybe I'm not a monster. It had taken me 2 therapy appointments to conclude that maybe I wasn't a monster. And what led me to that was I went into Dr. Thompson with this pride letter that Jeremy had written, this case that he had made against me, and I showed him this. And the first thing he said was like, you know, in my experience, and I had also tossed out that my partner Colin had accused me of narcissism. And in the comment section, I don't want to reference the comments a whole lot just because we could go down these crazy rabbit trails, but we have been reading all the comments, and someone said, Ben, just drop the narcissism thing, because I've brought it up numerous times over the years that I've been accused of this, and it's gotten in my head. And when people that I trusted and cared about this much gave me a label, especially from the spiritual background we came in, you cannot ignore it. Mm-hmm. And so my logic side of my brain didn't believe it, because I knew that I don't know, it just wasn't consistent. I was actually like fine with being a narcissist. It would have been much easier had I just been like labeled that by the counselor. So I was actually kind of like looking for that in a way. But very quickly he said, Ben, you know, the types of person that has pride isn't the type of person that shows up to my office and asks me if they have pride. It's kind of a general statement, but there was, you know, there seemed to be some truth there.
And genuinely worried that you might be a narcissist.
Then he said, conversely, reading this type of letter, and he was holding up the 6-page pride document, is one of the most prideful things I know of that someone can do, or something like that. Maybe I'm sounding a little more extreme. But he was like, this document reeks of pride. And he didn't know Jeremy. He had never met him, you know, but he was just talking about kind of anonymously the author of a document like this that makes these types of
claims,
certain accusations about the intentions of one's heart. Mm-hmm. Sounds really more like pride than what I had. So anyways, my first appointment with him, I was skeptical, because I was like, okay, you want my money, you're kissing my ass, tell me what I want to hear. This is whatever, dude. Like, I don't like my ass being kissed. But then the second appointment, or maybe it's the second or the third, I don't remember, but I came back and I said, okay, if it's not pride, what sin is it? Mm-hmm. And this is just the world we were under, where it was like, you're born with sin. If anything's wrong, it's sin. So if you have sin, you need to like pray the sin away, repent the sin away, root the sin out, stop the sin. It was all sin.
Really obsessed with sin.
So people were getting hurt. I was obviously the common link. So it's obviously my sin. And once again, I'm actually totally fine with all this. I've like done hard things in my life. This is not like that big of a deal to admit that I have sin. And he said, I'll never forget this story.
This was a really groundbreaking moment. What he said next.
Even though you weren't even there, right?
No, I was. Oh, maybe not. I feel like I was there.
I've told the story so many damn times
Yes.
that it was so important.
Oh.
And he said, so Ben, if a woman had been sexually abused as a child, and because of that, she had an aversion to having sex with her husband, she didn't want to have sex with her husband because of this sexual abuse she had, would you say that's a sin? And I mean, intuitively, I'm like, no, duh, that's not a sin. And he was like, that's an area of immaturity or an area of unhealthiness that she can grow in and heal from, but it's not a sin.
Or woundedness, yeah.
And in my second appointment, the first thing he said to me, where I was like, damn, that you're not kissing my ass and that's worth it. He said something like, seems like you have an exaggerated need for intimacy and significance. That's what he said to me. And I was like, holy fuck. How do you know me?
Yeah.
I mean, I go big or I go home, and I'm like, I'll never end a relationship. I'll go deeper. If you stay up till 3 a.m., I'll stay up till 4 a.m. I mean, we didn't even talk about this, but I think I wrote 400 letters in high school, mostly to girls, but not like sexual in nature. It was just to share my feelings and to hear their feelings and to let them know I cared about them and that I thought they were cool.
Yeah.
Cammie being you probably got like 30 letters from me in high school. We won't get into how many you sent.
Not that many.
We will. It was about 3.
More than that. We have this conversation every time.
Okay, where was I? So now I have this exaggerated need, according to my therapist, for significance and intimacy.
Which, it's really interesting to me how he worded that, because I think he was careful to choose words that weren't polarizing and weren't negative.
They weren't moral.
And they weren't moral, yeah.
Like, exaggerated need is like above average, larger. Like, you really, really want this.
Yeah, and intimacy and significance, like, those words, it's like, well, everyone wants that, at least to a certain degree. But you just happen to have an extra dose.
So then, that's the context, meeting 2 or 3, when I said, what sin is it? He looks across at me and says, I don't think it's a sin.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's an area of possible wounding and healing. And I just could not believe that. I mean, something about what he said, like, I wanted to believe. I had never heard anyone talk this way. And it was like, up until this point, I was the bad guy. That was the one thing everyone agreed on. Even I agreed on it.
It was like a breath of fresh air. I mean...
And it wasn't even like... I was still like, we'll see, dude. Because when I called Cammie, still... I called her. I was driving home from the appointment. I was like, Cammie, turn on the camera, because we were vlogging every day back then. And I said on speakerphone, I said, maybe I'm not a monster.
Yeah.
It was just still a maybe back then.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is what, and it was after that meeting I said, Cammie, you have to come to these therapy meetings. And from that point on, we've been to every single one together. Just because I was like, you have to hear this guy talk.
Yeah.
He's talking in a way I've never heard anyone else talk.
It was so refreshing. Like, looking back, I think it was so refreshing to get out of that bubble that we were in. That, like, suffocating bubble.
Yeah, and Henry Cloud writes about this quite a bit when he talks about entropy, the law of entropy, which is the most important words, or the beginning words, in my opinion, that say, in a closed system, whatever inside the system lends itself towards chaos, or, more chaos. But it's in a closed system. The second you open the system up, there's opportunities for growth. So this guy, I don't know whether he's just, to this day, I can't figure out if he's just a fucking wizard. I think he was pretty perfect for what we needed. But also, like Cammie said, he was just on the outside. Mm-hmm. And he was the only person even allowed to speak to us on the outside. And it'll get crazy as we explain, like, you'll see the response of other people, and they keep on referring back to, they're like, well, we're not going to talk to anyone on the outside. We need to talk to David. We need to talk to Stephen. Otherwise, it's not even a real conversation. That happens.
Those other people don't exist.
So we go into this next meeting now after, we're told that we need to send a blanket letter to these 5 families saying, we're bad. It's our fault. We're sorry. We're willing to listen to anything you have to say to us, mm-hmm. and we'll take the blame and just listen, and we'll tell you more to come. That's what we're being told to do. So that's what we go tell Dr. Thompson. And by the way, still, if I haven't made this clear, none of these families have still come to us. This is all being run through this middleman. It was David and Stephen, and I've come to see, like, man, talk about being in a position of control. If you want to, like, get off on control, this is like, we'll let the story speak for itself, but it gets crazier. So at this appointment, Dr. Thompson, he asked us, he goes, are you sorry for everything? We said, no. We actually don't believe it's all our fault. We believe we've done some things, but we believe what we're asked to apologize for is not accurate. And he said, and then he kind of, and I've never seen this in any of our appointments, and I think we're past 50 appointments with him now. He pleaded with us, and he said, if you don't believe it, please do not apologize for something you don't believe in. It might make things easier in the short run, but it will only make it worse in the long run.
For you and for the other people.
Yeah. And with his help, we crafted kind of a counter proposal, which said, okay, guys, David and Stephen, we are not willing to submit to this blanket thing. This is what we are willing to do. And I have this copied here, cut and pasted. We would like to apologize for specific behaviors that have hurt these families. This is the process with which we are willing to go through for each of these families. Whenever they're ready and willing to come to us with specific behaviors or specific things we've done, you can hear this word specific again, that have caused them to feel hurt by us, we would like to apologize to them directly, not through a middleman. We're willing to have one or both of you there for their support. So we were even willing to have David and Stephen there, which now feels crazy to me. With how much abuse we've gone through, I would not include them. I wouldn't even be in the same room with them anymore. So then we said, I know we had talked about a group email in our previous meeting, but based upon the feedback we've gotten from our counselor, we have decided that a blanket apology and an email sent to everyone for things we haven't heard about directly from these people would not be beneficial for us or for them. And then, well, do you have anything to say about that?
Mm-mm.
I do.
Go for it.
I thought I did. Oh, this is what I was going to say. Someone said in the comments, and this is kind of like a no-brainer, but we need to address it. If you are from the Christian church background, you are very familiar with Matthew 18. Which Matthew 18 is the verse that kind of lays out like a church discipline process. And it basically says, like, when a brother sins against you, you go to that brother one-on-one. And people are saying, oh, maybe they're doing Matthew 18 on you. Well, they kind of were, but actually not. Because Matthew 18 would be if these families had each come to us individually. But for whatever reason, they didn't. And they have their reasons. You know, this is where there's another side to the story that we're not talking about because we haven't lived it. And that's what's kind of unfortunate about this format is, like, I really wish there was, like, we could play sound bites or interview footage of the other side. But this is just our perspective on it. But these families did not come to us personally and say, you did this. And then if the process would go, if we deny that or rebuff that, then they would come back with a witness. And then if that was rebuffed, then they would come back with the church, I believe. And then if that was rebuffed, they would then kick us out of the church. So that's people saying, oh, this is what's happening. The only problem is we come back and we say we're willing to actually go through that process, or at least start it, with saying if any of these people want to talk to us directly, let's talk. And people are saying, oh, well, they're afraid to talk to you, which is really fascinating because I'm like, okay, well, what do you do with that if you're in our position? And we'll get to that, like at least our therapist's explanation of that. But it doesn't really matter. Regardless, David and Stephen were not willing to go through with us on this process because, true to their word, they said, we are only willing to partner with you on this. Partner, that's a funny word, rape you, if you do everything that we say. And we had gotten enough courage, and it was still scary, I remember.
Yeah. I mean, I knew at that point we were fucked. Like, we were going to lose a lot. I didn't know to what extent, but.
And where was I? Okay, so they bailed.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if they really bailed. We were like,
well, they didn't like fully bail yet. Like, Stephen, he met with us like one more time or something. I don't remember, but
so then, the biggest thing that we did to this day, this was now 1 year after we had started this process. It was on December 7th, so almost a full year. We delivered a letter to everyone in our community, letting them know that we were ending all activities that we were hosting and any informal leadership position of anything that resembled anything, even though most of it, everything was unofficial. I was mentoring 3 guys at the time. And as we shared in previous episodes, we were hosting or leading around 20 events a week. Total Bible twice a week, Shabbat, working out 3 times a week. That was just kind of like a leadership thing. A Friday morning meeting. That's,
a lot.
Tuesday night meeting. Just goes on and on. And we canceled everything, which was so drastic because these were the events that we had loved, we were bragging about, we found our identity and our life in, we found our socialization in, our kids were meeting with their friends in. We had dedicated our entire life to this. These were the people that we had bought properties to live next to us. These were those meetings.
Yep.
One of these couples we had married, we had been to people's births, and now we are just, and this was not accidental, but we had realized that this structure of relationships we were in was actually toxic itself. And even though it wasn't just our sin, the structure was still dangerous, even though it was like completely informal. Mm-hmm. So then the next thing that's interesting is December 19th. So 1 week after that, I get contacted. Stephen Manuel calls us in his office. And we had at this point said, hey, we're not going through this process with you, obviously, because you guys, it's all or nothing, and we're not willing to do all. But we're willing to go through this counselor. This counselor is a Christian. It's highly recommended by this church, Crossroads. This guy is highly regarded. He's not some fringe wacko. So would you be willing to meet with him? Because we still wanted the approval of David and Stephen for some reason.
Well, I think maybe we thought we could win them over.
Yeah, I think, we totally thought that.
We could have both. We could,
Because back then, we actually thought this was about restoration. Because if they were trying to figure out my sin, wouldn't they be really interested? But this is what was shocking to me. We had, at this point, had 5 or 6 meetings with our counselor and learned all these crazy things about me. While he didn't say I was a narcissist and while he didn't say I was full of pride, we did learn a ton of stuff.
Yeah, and these other people weren't interested in any of that stuff.
Yeah, so then I was like, well, after interviewing all these families, don't you want to know what we've been learning? Because you're the one that even sent us to the counselor. And this is part of the submission process, was to go to the counselor, even though we're paying for it all ourselves. But when they called us into that meeting, they didn't ask us what we've been up to for the last 5 months. They just said, okay, we've concluded what it is that you have done and who you are. We know.
Yeah.
So that, even if, that's what was kind of tipping me off. I was like, man, this can't be about actually getting to the answer here, because we've made progress. And I was really excited about the progress we made. We were changing left and right to a point where it was actually our meetings with our counselor that led us to cancel all of our meetings and hosting events in leadership positions. Not anything that Stephen and David had told us to do.
But Stephen and David only wanted progress under their terms, whatever progress meant to them.
And that's when we could start to see, especially in hindsight, this was never as much about progress as it was about submission.
And it wasn't about restoring you.
And this is I just want to toss this out, you guys, because if you're in this, it's real easy to get this confused. And you cannot know, I'm gonna take a soapbox here for a second. You cannot know which it is by what people say. The only way you can know is by looking at actions.
Yep.
And the way that you know, at least the way that we found out, was if it's about submission, you could submit for 10 years, but if you don't submit once, you will fail. You'll be kicked out.
Yeah.
Even if the way that you're not submitting leads towards more growth, whether it be individually or corporately. So while oftentimes it's labeled, they say it's not really about submission. Churches are really about growth and are really about connecting with God and getting closer to God and these types of things. And I actually think they might believe that, a lot of this is subconscious, but people don't get kicked out for not growing. People get kicked out for not submitting.
And what's above submission, why do they care so much about submission? It's because they care about power and control, and they want to control you. And the only way to control you is to have you submit.
And it's not, man, I don't know how to say this because I don't even want to fucking disclaim it. What I was going to say is there's not ill will, but there is a lot of fear. And when you're not submitting, you are very threatening to the structure.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't think any of these people in their minds were like, I want to get them.
No.
That doesn't make it any better, by the way.
Yeah, I don't think they were being malicious, but I do think that there was some power-hungry people that wanted to control.
So then in December, Stephen calls us back into his office. And if you guys remember Colin, he was my business partner. We had gone to camp together, he had lived with us in our first apartment, our first one-bedroom apartment, or two-bedroom apartment. I had taught him how to play blackjack. We had started multiple businesses together. We had been on our 5-year anniversary together, and he was the one that, under David and Stephen, said that he wanted to now sell the business or buy the business, but he would not partner anymore. So they led us in that process. And what I left out was in that first conversation that was chaperoned by David. When Colin said that he wanted to sell the business, he said he would not talk about the relationship until the business was sold. implying that for us to work on a relationship, we had to first sell the business and then we'd be able to work on a relationship. Well, we're 6 months past that. And there's been no conversation. They had a kid. I think I left a message and said, hey, congratulations. Don't hear back. And finally, in December, Stephen reads us a letter that Colin wrote that says, well, I got it. I have the notes right here. That Colin doesn't want to be contacted since there has been no repentance or signs of change. So this is what's crazy. Like, we have canceled everything in our life. I mean, before this, I didn't have a job, you guys. Like, my entire life was community. I was like an unpaid pastor in a way. At least that's how I saw myself and my identity and the amount of work and energy and money that we had invested into this community. And we had quit everything. And we had quit the vlog for the 2 weeks. And we had sold the business like everyone said. I had given him that business sale agreement that said he could name the price. We had started going to counseling. We had started implementing and reading all the books the counselor told us to do. And then after that, we're told there's no change.
Right.
And I'm like, and
then just throwing around the word repent. Repent of what?
Part of it pissed me off, but part of it was so nice to see it so clearly, because I think that's when we were finally able to see.
This was never about that.
We could have been jumping through hoops forever, and then if we don't jump through the last one,
it negates
everything. It reminds me of like this guy named Dan Savage, who's like the sex columnist in Seattle. He said, monogamy is so weird. He said, you can be an Olympic athlete, like a gold medal snowboarder, and then you fall down the hill one day and you're still a gold medal snowboarder. He said,
they don't take away all your gold medals.
They don't take away your gold medals and they don't call you a loser. But when it comes to monogamy, he said, you could be faithful for 60 years and then you can get a hand job in Thailand and people will say, you suck at monogamy. You just
you're a piece of shit.
It discounts everything. Yeah. Like you discount. And in a way, it was very much like that. Like we submitted our entire life, in every way we knew how. Mm-hmm. And then we couldn't anymore. Like we didn't agree to it. We thought it was dangerous to us and other people. Mm-hmm. And then we were called rebellious and non-submitting by the same people. Stephen had sent me the text message after that first meeting and said like, congratulations, you're doing great. And we were told we were smart and courageous and submissive. Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. Can you sense there's a story here? Mm-hmm. Okay, where are we?
So Stephen read that note from Colin.
And I think this is a good time to point out, well, no, let's not yet. But then the next big thing that happens is you and I are now under the impression that we have more clarity on what actually went wrong. Yeah. So Cammie and I schedule an apology retreat, mm-hmm. which is weird to even mention, call it that, because I've never heard of anyone else even doing this before. But we went to Indianapolis for the weekend for the express purpose of drafting an apology letter to send to these relationships that were so important to us. Mm-hmm. Even though none of these people to this day had still come to us mm-hmm. to ask for an apology. We had learned so much in counseling and we were like, this shit is so fucked up.
Yeah. We were apologizing for our side of it.
And I think, we still knew that there was something wrong. We just didn't agree with what they were saying was wrong. So I have this apology letter here, and I think I'm going to just read it because it's, to me, it feels like a masterpiece, not because it's actually genius, but because for us, these conclusions cost us so much to get to that.
Well, and it signifies a real turning point
Yes.
for us.
So we wrote this letter, and it's kind of a form letter. We because it had to do with us, and there's intro, and it sounds kind of nice, and we customize it a bit to specific people. But I just want to read the kind of the confession area, the brunt of what we had concluded. Actually, do you want to read it?
Sure.
Because I feel like I'm talking a lot.
Yeah.
Let's just read all those.
Okay. The following are the ways we believe we have wronged you. We crossed boundaries in speaking into aspects of your life that we were not invited into. We crossed boundaries and entered into... Oh no, this is different. We crossed boundaries and entered into aspects of your life that were not wise and was not appropriate for us to enter into. We were immature and naive and wanting intimacy without awareness of the complications and consequences. We accepted roles of leadership that were inappropriate and ambiguous. We assumed leadership roles without permission. We imposed our family mission on you instead of encouraging you to pursue your own, and used you for our own purposes and benefit. We made judgments about the value and importance of your calling when it differed from ours. We were insensitive about the impact of our leadership and the pain it caused. We withdrew and were passive in fighting for the relationship. We sacrificed long-term health for short-term companionship. We looked down on you and tried to fix you. We used you for companionship and applied the label of friendship prematurely, recklessly, and ambiguously. We did not set or communicate boundaries and sent mixed messages about the relationship.
Okay, now we could talk about this letter for a little bit.
Yeah.
Anything that stands out to you right off?
Oh, just even just how much I've changed since writing this letter. Like some of the things, and it was not wise. It may still be true, but I don't care as much about those things. I mean, I think there's a few that I care a lot about. Trying to fix people and looking down on them.
Which, okay, I need to pause again because the irony of that is in that 2 years that we were in Stephen's huddle, that's what he called it in his house, where he was training us in Bible techniques. Some of the most damaging things we ever did, we were trained to do by him and the church at large. Because the church is all about fixing people. We don't call it that. But when you
call it mentoring, pastoring, I don't know.
When someone comes to church and they say, I'm not a Christian, oh my gosh, Christians get the biggest hard on. Yeah. Be like, I'll pray for you. I'll teach you how to not do drugs. I'll teach you how to not swear. I'll teach you how to get married monogamously and get a stable job and not cuss at your kids or smoke cigarettes. It's all about fixing people. And we were really good at it. We didn't care about the exact same things a church would. But that mindset, we found out, is actually really damaging to people. So I want to back up a little bit because during this handoff, Steve and David actually totally agreed, and they were like, it sounded like what they communicated was kind of relief. They said, hey, we're glad that Dr. Thompson is taking over. I asked Stephen, is there any hard feelings? He said no. Well, that's not true. He said one tiny thing. He said, I feel like I put all this energy into it and you're not honoring it. But he said, that's fine. We gave each other a hug and we parted ways. Mm-hmm. And Stephen met with Dr. Thompson and gave him the whole file of the interviews that he had done with these families, all his notes. Mm. So then we go into counseling.
That's right.
And the purpose of this counseling meeting is to hear our counselor now's opinion of how we fucked over 5 families. So I'm like, great. This is going to be a fun one. This guy that we had just, he's the only person that likes us.
It's funny how even at this point we were waiting to get punished
Yeah.
or disciplined.
I was like, this
By
guy
our
that finally
counselor.
likes us, once he hears what we've done to these 5 families, now he's not going to like us. But I was still saying, but we'll finally get closer to the truth. So it's worth it. So then he sits down to us and he says, so I've read these files. And you know what he says? The only thing he says is, you have sure surrounded yourself by some psychologically damaged people. And I had no idea what he was talking about. Actually, that's not true. He said 2 things. The other thing he said was, I read through this list, and this is kind of piggybacking what we said earlier. No one lists any behaviors. It's all feelings that they have. So no one, he said, reading through the entire list, no one said, Ben touched my puppy inappropriately.
Yeah.
Or
Ben pushed me down the stairs.
Called me this.
Yeah.
Or, there was no specific behaviors. It was all these like feelings that people are trying to sort out and figure out, which God bless them. I would be too. You need to figure it out. And I'm going to blow my load right now and tell you guys the punchline of what I've learned through this whole fucking mess. Jeremy didn't like me.
Right.
Jeremy
still doesn't like you.
Is uncomfortable around me. Jeremy is insecure when I'm around. He always has been. With business, his wife, and the family. And at times he made money off of it, and at times he didn't. And he liked parts of me. I'm not making it sound black or white. But there was huge parts of me that he could not reconcile or understand. And for a lot of Christians, we are not given the language to say, I don't like you. You're not allowed to say that or even feel that. Or I don't want to be around you. Or I can't handle you. Or...
because then you're not loving that person.
Yes. So the idealism always takes precedent over reality. So instead of having this language of being able to say, fuck off, I don't want to be around you because it makes me uncomfortable, he had to come up with biblical lingo to discount my personhood. That was the only option he had left. And I understand it because growing up in the spiritual communities that we did, feelings are not valid.
Especially if you're a leader, which he is in that community, to say to your brother-in-law, I really don't like you and I don't want to be around you. Just, and leave it at that, is really would give you a bad rap or something.
And this is what we had started to notice with a lot of this community now, family after family. So, I'm not one of the types that is like, oh, that's coincidental or it's all their fault. And for a long time, I was willing to take the blame. But it wasn't, I started to see after a while, even if we took the blame, the problem was still kind of there. It wouldn't go away. So the problem had to be deeper. And my answer came in a funny conversation I had at a Starbucks almost a decade before, where I was talking to a guy and I said, what do you do? And he said, oh, it's funny. I go to churches after the pastor has been found out for sexual misconduct and I help them heal. Real funny, right? And I said, oh, and we had just gone through this with our head pastor of the Presbyterian church. And I was like, wow, that must be crazy, dealing with all these people and all the devastation that's left behind. And he said, well, it's kind of funny. Actually, it's not what people think it is. He said, because if I don't help the congregation realize how they're at fault in the situation, they're going to hire someone that fills the exact same role as the previous guy. And to be a congregation that puts a guy on a pedestal for 10 years and allows sexual misconduct to go on while you're making them your hero shows that there's a flaw in the congregation itself. And until that's fixed, the same problem will go on. My mind was blown. Mm-hmm. And that, I don't know if I just naturally think that way and appreciate that or whether he created that thought in me, but from then on, I started seeing the world. When Lance Armstrong fell, I was like, okay, yeah, Lance Armstrong is an asshole and a liar, but also you guys turned him into a hero. So what did you expect? It was.
And And so he had further to fall because you turned him into a hero.
Yeah, the world demands heroes or kings, as the Bible puts it, whatever. So what we had seen was that people are looking for leaders. They use leaders. And we did the exact same thing with Stephen and David and Jeremy and pastors and authors.
Tell us what to do, like help us feel better about ourselves.
Give me a sense of confidence that I'm doing the right thing. Let me check off my box that I'm in submission, that I'm attending a thing, that I can tell people when they ask me, are you a part of a church? Yes, we live in a community. Yes, I'm behind a vision that makes me feel good. We provided all that. But there was a cost to it. And, people were looking to submit to us, and we were like, fine, we'll be your leader. We agreed to it. So when people asked us, hey, what do you think I should do? Should I get married? Should I do this? Should I have sex or not have sex or have a kid? I mean, big decisions. Should I buy a house? We would give our advice. A lot of times it was asked for. Sometimes it wasn't asked for, but on the meta level, usually it was agreed to. And when people take your advice, just like what had happened with us and David and Stephen, we took their advice, we did what they said, and then it didn't work out. We blamed them. We had massive amounts of resentment. But I think this is where it could have gone wrong with us. If we would have said, Stephen and David fucked us over, like, bring down the church, they suck. And like just started this campaign about like kind of playing the victim, which although I do think we were victims, I also understand how we were completely complicit. And we wanted something out of that arrangement that they were giving us. And if we can't acknowledge that, we will always be the victim and we will not be able to grow. So we sent out this letter, and what Dr. Thompson said is he said, what are your expectations for this letter? And I said, I don't know. I don't really, maybe I'll hear back from one or two people. And because we had now understood that these patterns were so habitual to who we were, even though Stephen and David had targeted 5 families that said they were hurt, we decided to send this letter to, I think it was 16 people that we thought we had hurt in this way. That we had been in this type of hierarchical submission structure with, almost always inexplicitly. Like it wasn't spelled out, it wasn't clear, but that's just how it functioned. Because we were the type of family that had money and charisma and confidence and resources. So we decided to send this letter out to 16 people. I totally lost my train of thought.
Yeah.
Oh, this is what he said. He said, how many people do you expect to hear from? I said 1 or 2 or 3.
Yeah. He's like, good. I'm glad you're keeping your expectations low.
He said, good. But he said, but don't get discouraged. Even if you don't hear from people, it might take them a couple more cycles of relationships. And someday they might think back and say, oh, remember that time Ben apologized for this? Now I've seen this 2 or 3 times. Because, and this is where this becomes so important. At least this is our conclusion. And this is really, I'm going to hang out on this for a little bit because this is really the most valuable stuff we've learned in the last decade. It's really changed so much of the way we think about the world. But if we would have done what David and Stephen would have suggested we do, which is really just to put ourselves as the victims and to scapegoat ourselves and say, this is our fault, this is not your fault. Then what would have happened to these 16 families or 5 families is they would have left us because we disappointed them. We're the bad leaders. And they would have went and now tried to go and find good leaders and replaced us with someone who fits that role and gives them those things, the confidence, the clarity, the vision, the sense of morality, the sense of submission, whatever these boxes are they're checking off. And they will do the exact same cycle. It might take 1 year, it might take 10. I think we fast-tracked it because we were so intense that we're like, hey, let's not just show up once a week. Sometimes showing up on Sunday once a week and only asking for 15%, it could take 20 years, or most people, they might not ever get fed up with that. We went balls to the walls, and we were like, hey, let's meet 20 times a week and live life together and eat meals together and raise our kids together and be at each other's births and deaths and all the rest of it. And I think because of that, what I've heard said about our family, and specifically me with my speed, is that I go through cycles in 3 years that take people a lifetime to go through.
Yay us.
We ruin relationships quickly. We're so efficient. Are you still awake here? You hanging?
I'm still hanging.
You've had a long day.
Yeah.
So that's it, you guys. I mean, like, there's a whole lot more I was going to get into, and there's more to the story. And I think we'll try. But this, being able to send this apology letter, and really to be able to step away from that cycle, it was so hard. When we had doubt ourselves every week. Decisions I had to. It was like I was addicted to ministry and helping people. I remember specifically, it was Sunny's birthday, and they hadn't contacted since we said. Actually, there's more to talk about. Since we had said we're not hosting anymore, I was waiting to see other people step up and to be like, okay, we'll host or we'll, still meet, and no one invited us, and a lot of relationships fizzled. So instantly we thought we made a huge mistake. Because we ended these relationships, and we thought ending relationships was the worst thing you could do, especially when you have the finances and the energy and the emotions to continue it, as long as we were just willing to host.
Yeah.
I mean, even my own mom, she was like accusing me of being greedy by asking for money or not hosting. And I was like, this isn't about money. Like, what we had realized was we did not listen to other people in the nonverbals. Because we had so much energy and we constantly invited everyone and they showed up when it's like free food and free sense of vision and purpose, we thought, oh, everyone really wants to be here and values us as much as we value them. And then the second we stopped and they're not inviting us, there's your information. And we never got to a point where we were willing to let that information soak in and listen. Mm-hmm. We'd like host another event. But now that we were in a position where we're basically tying our own hands behind our back and saying we're not going to lead anything indefinitely, we're just going to sit back and see who invites us. And it's like a cricket field. It was so difficult and painful. Yeah. I remember...
It felt wrong, but I knew it wasn't.
It was like Sonny's birthday, and I wanted so bad to buy him like a smoker. It was like the $600 thing at Costco, a Traeger meat smoker. And you were like, Ben, I think you're relapsing.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
the
no,
smoker will make everything better.
I'm like, no, I'll do it anonymously. Like, we'll just drop it off on his thing. And I had to like trust Cammie and like not do it. But I so wanted to like buy things and host things and like be there for people. Mm-hmm. I mean, it was like worse than any drug I've ever done, which I haven't done many drugs. But
that was probably like, yeah, you wanted to be significant or...
I think it's more addicting than sex.
Something. Wow, that's saying a lot. Okay.
It is. But it was, I mean, that feeling you get from like being in a position of power and leadership and influence.
Oh, yeah. It's huge.
Even when it's unofficial, it doesn't matter. Oh, okay, where are we? There was a few more things I wanted to say. We're really not going to get to...
Do we have a cliffhanger for?
Oh, we do. Oh, do we? Shit. Yeah, we do. Okay, we just added another episode because I was really hoping to get through this, but such is life. Mm-hmm. So everything's good. And in terms of hearing back from people, a few people said like, oh, okay, we got an email back from one person that said, that was the worst apology letter I've ever gotten in my entire life. Like, okay.
Do you want to say sorry again?
How many apology letters do you get? Most people we just didn't hear back from at all.
Right.
We didn't hear back from Colin. In fact, I don't even know if he got the letter because at this point, he's saying that he's only willing to get information through Stephen Manuel. So
Yeah,
we can't even.
He could have gotten it and never opened it. Who
Well,
knows?
no, I'm saying Stephen Manuel might have never delivered. I'm not supposed to say his last name, but Stephen might have never delivered the letter to Colin.
Oh, because we gave it to him.
Yeah, because Colin had put this ban up saying he didn't want to be contacted by us at all anymore, directly. Had to all go through Stephen. Lucas, a person that had also lived on our block, that was a business partner that I had met with every morning for close to 4 years. He said, this letter is great. Let's meet about it with David and Stephen. To which I said, we're not willing to do that.
Yeah.
We're willing to meet with our counselor if you want, or someone else, or talk about it over email. And he said he would not talk to us unless David and Stephen were both there.
No thanks.
And there is a glimmer of hope, though. There were a few people that we were in mentoring relationships with that we... In fact, one guy in particular, I'm gonna call out one person. And I'm not going to say his name because I don't think it's necessary. But he said, wow, I noticed that I've done this with multiple males in my life that have constantly ended in disappointment, where I've put someone in this position of power and I used them. And
I remember hearing that and felt so confirming that we weren't fucking crazy. Is like, oh yeah, there is two sides to this. Like, we knew that, but to hear someone actually own it,
yeah,
was big.
Yeah. And somehow our apology letter, I think, had helped him to conclude that he was also a part of the problem. Even though that wasn't the purpose of our letter. We were just saying our truth. We didn't ask anyone to apologize to us. But we now started to see that we were actually being used also.
Yeah.
And this is where we're going to end, because I got one last point and then a cliffhanger story. Oh, shit. We're supposed to do an advertisement. How do we do that? Maybe we already did it. I don't know. Screw it.
One last point.
Yes. When in the Christian world, you can climb the ladder. You can even go backwards on the ladder. You know, when you commit a sin, you can even apologize and you can say, hey guys, I really fucked this one up. You would be like, I fricked this one up, if you're in a church. And I'm going to make it right, and I'm going to apologize, and I'm going to do all this. And everyone's cool with all that. But what we did was we actually said, we don't want to be on the ladder anymore. We will not submit, and we are not asking for anyone to submit to us. And that, I think, in hindsight, was the most disruptive, dangerous, and controversial thing and threatening thing that we could have done. Because everyone was fine with us as we were like, hey, this ladder is real, and we're underneath Stephen and David. I mean, never mind the fact that we fictionally put them there. Mm-hmm. But as long as we were playing that, even when we had people underneath us, this is what boggles my mind. To the very end, when we sent out that letter canceling all of our formal relationships and community and schedule, there was people that were pleading with us not to cancel it. So it's like, wait a second. And now, 3 months later, you're accusing us of being narcissistic, prideful, this and that. Then why did you want us to be mentoring your ass, motherfucker? Like, which is it? Are we crazy or not? Because if we're crazy, fine. But who's crazier? Someone that's crazy, or someone that asks a crazy person to mentor them or lead them for 10 years? Like, which is it? And this is where I could see there was not a consistency to, if we were crazy, and this is where even Stephen was having me teach the staff at the fastest growing church in America. I looked it up this year. It was 2017. It was the fastest growing church in America. And he was having me teach a 4 to 6 week class to the head staff. And I was speaking on video on the main stage. So like, okay, if I'm fucked up, let's say for 1 second, you're right. And I have shepherding outages and I'm a fucking narcissist and prideful and everything you said is true. Well, who's crazy here? Me or the person that puts a position like me in power? And that's when you can, it's those types of questions that really led us to be like, wait a second. Like, I really would love to, it would just be so much simpler if we could just own this and apologize and it would all go away. But we started to see that the system of using people, and we had done it our entire life, where we had found a pastor or a Bible teacher or an older man or David and Stephen, and we had said, hey, you tell us what to do and we'll do it. And that's where we'll get our sense of validity. In a way, guys, that wasn't really submission. It's just using someone to feel good about ourselves. And I know that it's not true submission or love, because when those people didn't work out, we found someone else. And when that pastor didn't work, we found another pastor. It's just like, it's like an empty puzzle piece that you just try and put new puzzle pieces inside. The hole is always there. And what we started to conclude...
Until you address it. Really address it.
And what we started to conclude is we don't want to be in that game anymore, where we're people's leaders being used, and where we're using people to build our little pyramid underneath us so that we can be at the top of something. It felt good, but it wasn't worth it. And we didn't even know we were doing it, because we were like, we're not even a part of a church.
So we unsubscribed.
I mean, so much of this was happening. The reason why it was so confusing, because we were never having people sign documents or asking people to submit, really. I mean, at least formally, or give us money. There was none of this. It was all like the stuff that was happening. And one conversation I'll never forget. I mean, even at the end, I remember meeting with Sonny and saying, hey guys, we're not going to be hosting. And he said, it feels like you're just taking your ball and you're going home, like you're being poor sports. And another guy that was living with us, the young married couple, Wes, he said, you were like my second dad. And that's when I realized, even though we're being accused of abuse, no one wanted to end it. Because having the role filled is worth whatever pain you have to go through. Like, instead of having to rethink that role that we find ourselves in. Okay, that's really fucking heady.
Yeah.
Don't want to go there anymore, but that's the big stuff for us. And then this is the cliffhanger. July, 6 months after we sent out the letter, and everyone said they're cool.
July 2017.
July 24th, 2017. I go to a coffee shop, and I run into my friend Mark. Mark had been he was in my top 3 friends, probably my second closest friend besides Colin for the last decade. He had been the only person we had appointed as another manager of our blackjack team, so I had literally traveled the world with Mark, played blackjack, lived with, went on trips with, climbed Mount Rainier with, and I see him at a coffee shop. And he says, I say, hey, what's up? And he said, oh, hey, the other day I talked to David and Stephen, and they told me what's going on, and I'm not allowed to talk to you anymore. Fucking hilarious. Mm-hmm. All right. So that is where we're going to end off this episode. 13 minutes over what I had hoped. But
And we're not done yet.
And we're not done yet. Okay, I feel like I'm supposed to make some announcements or something. We're reading all the YouTube comments. We have 20 people that have rated us on iTunes, and we have like 5 stars, which is like makes me feel really good. Maybe I'm not a monster.
Thank you.
And if you want to listen to this podcast, you can do it on all the podcasting platforms, or of course there's YouTube. If you want to contribute to the chair fund, I bought chairs today, and they were expensive, but I got 23% off. I had to make 3 phone calls to go from 15 to 23%. and I'm excited. So it's not too late to contribute if you want to. Those links are below. But those are going to be coming in 5 or 6 weeks. Anything else you want to say?
Thanks for listening to our wonderful story.
I am so anxious to hear. I feel like this episode, more than any other, this is the secret shit that I shared more today than I've shared in the last 4 years about the most important ways that we've changed our spirituality.
One thing I do want to say is the way I view people now is so different than how I used to view them in the ministry, I guess I'll call it, mindset. Now I meet a person. Well, I'll say back then I met a person and I would put them in a category immediately. I'd say, oh, could they mentor me or should I mentor them?
Believer, non-believer.
Believer, non-believer. All these like categories of
married, divorced,
superiority bullshit. And now I'm more than ever before, I'm just able to meet someone and just see them as a person and see them on the same level as me. Just because they're a person. And that feeling has been really liberating because I didn't realize how burdensome it was all these years to view people as either projects to be fixed or to view myself as a project and maybe this person that I just met can fix me. Talk about such a heavy burden to constantly carry around.
And you don't realize that until it's gone. And then you're like, oh, I can hang out with you and I don't have to have an agenda. I can actually just enjoy you.
Yeah.
Even if you're divorced, even if you're gay, even if you're a quote unquote unbeliever.
Yeah.
Or if you're Mormon or a hippie.
Yeah.
It's so...
anything.
And that was one of the things we apologized for, is treating people like projects.
Yeah.
And of course, there's a million podcasts that could be made about how this has changed how we see our kids.
Right.
Because we actually don't see a power structure with them anymore either.
Right.
Wow. Yeah. All right. Next week, we are going to find out the fallout from the coffee shop and what else we learned. It's late.
All right. Peace, everyone.
See you guys next time.